Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm Kirsten Houghton, a principal at SVA and the head of our nonprofit server group. This is a new format for us in light of what's going on with the pandemic. Normally, we would be at the Madison Club, but we're here today, and we really appreciate that you're taking the time out of your day to attend. I'd also like to thank Jill Donal and Todd Starkey, who represent QTI, the co-sponsor of this event. Jill and Todd are an integral part of this whole process and have helped us to develop content and then also recruit our speakers. On behalf of QTI, Todd would like to say a few words.
Thanks, Kirsten. And again, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We're glad you're able to take your lunch hour and spend some time learning some good tips and practices as we get through this crazy year. And no one knows that better than this audience here. And QTI is thrilled to be co-hosted with SVA. And as much as nonprofits are just built into the culture of QTI, we're thrilled we're able to bring this information back to you. So enjoy it. We have some awesome panelists. And again, thanks for coming today.
All right, thanks, Todd. With that, I would like to talk about just briefly our topic today. So we're going to talk about best practices, lessons learned, planning ahead for 2021 as best as we can at this point. Obviously, we're discussing these topics in light of the effects of COVID-19 to date, the impact the pandemic will have on our future, and our panelists will talk about how they've dealt with the situation thus far. We have so much uncertainty in our world that we thought it'd be a great idea to have this discussion with you so you could hear what your peers are thinking and then also give you the opportunity to ask questions. I also want to mention a little housekeeping. You will receive a survey when you leave the webinar, but also in your email. Please take the time to complete the survey as we do use the information you give us. We're always looking for great content and speakers and would be very appreciative if you shared your ideas. Our next webinar will be held on Tuesday, December 15th, so the same format. And we are still working on that topic and speakers, so you can see that we need your survey results. That would be very helpful. So at this time, we're going to get started, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. So first we have David Clutter. David is the Executive Director of the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin. We have Tom Linfield, who's the Vice President of Community Impact for the Madison Community Foundation. And last but not least, we have Renee Moe, President and CEO of United Way of Dane County. Thank you to all for joining us today. I know you will have plenty to share with our attendees. And just to mention that I'll serve as the moderator today, and you are all muted, so please submit your questions or comments, if any, through the chat room. I'll make sure we address those questions as the discussion goes on. So feel free to make comments as we go, and we'll weave that into the presentation itself. So just as an agenda of sorts for you, so you understand where we're going with this, our questions will revolve around the organization itself. So in this instance, it's the organizations that are represented on the panel, but also they'll have comments that I'm sure you can apply to your organization. How staff are being handled, morale, how they're coping, fundraising and support, the challenges there, what's happening, and then as best as we can, what the future holds. And for organizations in Madison and beyond, and also for these three organizations here today. So with that, with our panel, I will ask you a first question. So either in broad terms or more specific if you like, can you tell us what you've learned to the pandemic? So in other words, what has happened with operations, what has worked well, what hasn't worked, and just talk a little bit about that. And then with that, I will get this started by picking one of you, and I will start with David.
I have to unmute.
You have to unmute.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Kirsten, thank you for having us, and thanks to SVA and QTI as well. Yeah, well, I think as we all know, this has been a pretty challenging time, you know, what I guess we've tried to do here since this pandemic hit is one, focus on our operations. You know, as a foundation, the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin is a statewide nonprofit. Part of what we do is to provide funding for other conservation efforts throughout the state. but we run our own programs as well. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do is be pretty conservative, really look at how we keep our house in order, try to focus on making sure that we're sort of protecting our staff and our team. So we've sort of pivoted and done some focus more of our energies on making sure that we can retain staff, that we can support our staff, support our board, support our partners, have a little fun while we're all trying to struggle through this time. But also, I guess for an organization our size, we're a relatively small organization. We have a staff of 11 right now. And I think that's allowed us to be relatively nimble and flexible. So for us, that's really helped. We've been able to pivot, I think, relatively quickly and dealt with some pretty difficult circumstances. But I guess that for starters, that's some of the things that we've been thinking about.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great because I know a lot of organizations in the area are smaller and that's really helpful. I'll go to Renee next.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. And I also want to extend my thanks to SVA and QTI, both great partners with United Way. And I saw a lot of friends on the attendee list today. So hi, everybody. As an organization who brings the community together to solve problems, a big part of how we frame issues, mobilize resources, and hold ourselves accountable for results has been, really amplified during this whole pandemic. So in terms of what we've done operationally, the first thing was really figuring out how to get everybody unplugged from the mothership in the building on Atwood Avenue into homes. So I think that the technology infrastructure, the hardware, the software, getting everybody used to virtual meetings, that was one of the things that had to happen really quickly. And I'm really proud that thanks to our board's leadership, our technology committee and the team, our technology services folks, we were able to make that happen really quickly. And as a larger organization with set infrastructure, I recognize that it's not easy for our smaller organizations to do. And so we've really kept a tight communications channel, at least we think it's been pretty tight, with all the nonprofit agencies with whom we get to partner to see how they're doing and to try to help with some of that infrastructure as well. That was kind of the first phase of what we needed to do organizationally. The second thing was really how do we continue to accelerate services, because so much of what we do is around all those things people are calling 211 for. So once you lose your job or lose your income or get sick, how do you have the resources to stay in your housing, to get food, and to have that support that you need, especially as kids started going back to virtual school? So again, really staying closely in communication with nonprofits to figure out what resource capacity is needed, what our family's going through, and frankly, just a huge influx of people who've never utilized services before to be able to figure out how do I access what's out there, especially while stimulus wasn't up and running, and it took quite a few weeks for people to get unemployment benefits or any stimulus dollars. So, that was an original, push to help the community provide some resources to have some emergency relief, in addition to more of that long-term systems change work that we love to do. So those were the immediate things. Many more things I know we'll talk about, but that's where I'll start.
Okay, great. I do want to mention too, we can all be unmuted in this for now, so you can just pop in and make your comments. So I will go to Tom next.
Thank you. And we did get to see the registrant list. So although we can't see your faces, hello to all the people I know who are tuning in today. Similar to Renee, we had to figure out how to work from home. So there are 13 of us. We moved quickly to working at home and did whatever we could for employees, whether they needed internet or a printer or what have you. We were out fully for the first 3 to 4 months. In July, we started coming back 3 at a time per day with masks and gallons of disinfectant and a lot of protocols. Because we're downtown right off State Street, we have now decided to end that, unfortunately. I was loving going into the office once a week. So we have a few operations people who are doing one person at a time. So if you're in, you have the office to yourself, and we're all at home adjusting to doing Zoom board meetings. Everything's on the phone and Zoom, of course. I think the biggest adjustment for the office has been that we miss each other,
Mhm.
and that all of our interaction these days is business. There isn't that wonderful kind of social chatter and lubricant. So what we call our hallway chats. You know, if you walk down the hallway and end up talking with 4 people, you inevitably combine business discussion with how was your weekend, or how are the kids doing, or and vice versa. You start with something fun and then it turns into work. And I think that's a huge missing piece right now, that kind of social bridge. Speaking personally, so much of my life leading our grant making is doing site visits, convening groups of people to talk about ideas, visiting people. I'm a flaming extrovert. This pandemic is the enemy of the extrovert, and Zoom calls just don't make it. And as you know, I've been to many SVA presentations, and of course the joy of the presentation is seeing each other and breaking bread and having all those little 2-minute conversations with people, or following up after the meeting. And so I'm glad we're doing this, and hopefully what we say today will be helpful, but I can't wait till we can all be in the room again together.
Yeah, I agree as well. Those hallway chats, I miss that too. And I have found though that people, now that so much time has gone by, are reaching out just to say hi and what's going on, you know, even though it's virtual. It's what you got to do. But so it sounds like the transition with the organization is working well as it can be, and everybody's trying to be as safe as possible. But all of you work in some way or fashion with other people in the community, and just talk about how that's been working. I know, Renee, I'll go to you first, since you've got the situation with United Way, where you're working with the agencies, but you're also dealing with a host of other issues in the community as well. So if you'd like to speak to that, that would be great.
Sure. So you're right. I mean, I think that there are so many stakeholder groups, and you know, you look not only at the pandemic, the health crisis, the economic crisis, but also all the racial unrest. And so, you know, a lot of work going on with trust building between law enforcement and leaders of color, with nonprofits, and certainly the donor community. So, you know, one of the other biggest pivots we had to make is go to an all virtual campaign. We work with hundreds of companies to raise dollars for next year's agency budgets. So, you know, to be able to run a community-wide campaign virtually has been a big challenge. So, you know, you kind of go back to the basics. You've got to listen, figure out what people are going through, what are their needs. And when we first teed up, how do we do an emergency response fund, we were on the phone a lot with our city and county partners, looking at homelessness and shelters, looking at healthcare and what they needed for their essential workers and childcare. You know, all the families and nonprofits, which I mentioned already, in terms of those basic needs and the longer term support. You know, it's really just putting together a comprehensive picture. A lot of the businesses are also going through, you know, pandemic planning and emergency response. So from a corporate perspective, a lot of the business partners are trying to figure out, how do I keep my teams engaged when people are having a sense of just grinding out the work and changing and doing everything virtually? How do we have that sense of fun and community and team? And that has been a real opportunity to use the community's campaign and, you know, all sorts of facets to say, let's do something fun together. Let's, you know, let's remember why we love our community. Let's recognize that we have jobs. And even though it's really hard right now, a lot of people don't. So what can we be doing to contribute? And that contributes to your well-being, your happiness, your health, even when you are dealing with kids at home and virtual school and all the other changes that are going on in life. You know, disconnection from parents and grandparents, you know, all of those things that people are going through right now, not to mention folks who've actually gotten sick or have dealt with, you know, who gets sick, who dies, and who recovers, and how quickly. So in all those conversations, it's really been going back to what's happening, can we get a full picture, and then how do we band together to have those solutions to really respond.
All right. And David, you're in a unique situation. You're a smaller nonprofit. You're not as, like, I would say, outward faces as Renee or probably Tom, but just talk to us about how you're dealing with the people that utilize your services. How are you doing things differently, or what's happening with that?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a challenge. There's no question about that. I think, one of our main programs that we run on an annual basis is a field trip program to natural areas and wildlife areas around the state. And, we're running generally 240 to 280 field trips a year. And that's really been a way that we've interfaced with the public. We also have other programs that we're funding and other partners that we work with, but clearly that's all gone virtual. one of the ways that we pivoted with the field trip program is, we shut that down for the first half of the year, but then we did try to continue with our field trip program, but we did it in two ways. One was a virtual field trip program. We knew people were more online. So we were, trying to be thoughtful about, how we could still interact and provide a benefit for folks. The other thing we did is once the pandemic did sort of calm down a little bit, we did start our field trip program again, but we reduced the numbers down to 10 per field trip program. We put in social distancing expectations, mask expectations. We were still able to lead some of those programs. So, we're able to, at least get folks out and about a bit. But in terms of some of the other programming that we've done, we've just tried to do our best to over communicate, frankly, with our partners, our owners, our supporters, our board members. So that's been a big opportunity and challenge for us. And actually, we've, I think, deepened some relationships as a result.
Yeah, that's interesting too. I mean, I know for me personally, I actually see more, I see my clients, see my clients more than I have, because instead of, talking on the phone or doing a bunch of emails back and forth, we'll just get on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. So that's actually been a benefit in a weird way. But so with that, Tom, you had mentioned, you're usually out visiting, being your extroverted self and chatting. So are you able to do any visits now, kind of like you used to do, or is it all virtual, or what are you seeing? And then what issues are you seeing when you're visiting with people?
I've had 3 live outdoor meetings in 6 months.
About
And
what I've
that's
done.
what
I
I normally
believe it.
have, in a day or two. So no, I would say we have been doing everything we can to communicate by phone, by email, by Zoom. I think I've talked on the phone with probably 300 nonprofits in the last 6 months. And a lot of those phone calls are just, how are you? How are things going? Tell me. I actually think that's one of the things that we offer. It's almost more important than the money, is an ear and an understanding. And then if we can make connections, somebody will tell me something and I get an idea either for us or for another funder. So we've been certainly talking a lot more with other funders, partnering with more funders.
Right.
When this all hit and United Way had a COVID fund, we quickly on our website said, go to United Way's COVID fund. We've just funded a food pantry project in which we know of one co-funder. We work together to proactively fund this project, and we have 1 or 2 other foundations that may join us. So trying to simplify, trying to collaborate. I'm a big snail mail fan. I write a lot of letters personally, so I've been writing letters every day. So every day the post office comes and picks up some of my letters, and whether I'm reaching out to nonprofits for the most part, some donors, and I'm sending them drawings, interesting articles. I'm sending chocolate bars. Those have been a real pleaser. I have one very a great donor who keeps gushing because I send her a milk chocolate bar and everybody else sends her dark chocolate and she can't stand it. And neither can I. So I was thrilled. She's 2 or 3 times she's brought this up to me, and other people have told me, oh, apparently you sent so-and-so a chocolate bar. So, and I've done that with our staff. I've mailed staff letters. I like to draw, so I'll send them a drawing with a chocolate bar. Just anything that would kind of boost, nothing better than a nice surprise.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I haven't gotten any
sprinkled
chocolates
one day
I
in
know.
everybody's mailbox when I was in the office. Like, you need a surprise. You need something. And I'll add that we've actually instituted now, just for the last month or so, actually, we started doing it more regularly, hallway chats. So we have a once a week. If you want to connect by Zoom, and the rule is you don't talk about work. So we had one this morning. We talked about Halloween costumes and movies and what we're doing this weekend. And it's not everybody, it's just who wants to join. So it's different every week. But you really start to have a conversation, and it starts to feel by the end of the conversation like life is normal.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
chit-chatting. And I'm a real firm believer that if you can create that relationship with somebody with that kind of social dynamic, whether it's somebody you work with, somebody you give grants to, somebody who gives money to you, that's really what it's all about. This is so much about human connectivity and the idea that it takes a village. And I think from an employment standpoint, it just makes you better colleagues. If you can create that relationship, you're much more respectful of each other and able to work together. And
Right.
I think it's a very American thing that we think the less vacation, the more efficient we will be. The more we are at your desk, the more, and I think that's, having grown up in Europe, that's just not true. And I will say one of the hardest things during COVID, and I'm guessing many of you out there have this, it's very hard to stand up from your computer. I'm sitting in my study at home, and there are days where I'll get up after 5 hours and 4 hours of Zoom meetings. And I realize, oh, I forgot to have lunch. I've done nothing except be on. And I think that's very dangerous, because by the end of the week, you burn yourself out completely. And we have to really be careful. I think nonprofits are doing more work than anyone else right now. I just wrote a piece about this. I think nonprofits, the leadership that I have seen in the last 6 months has been from nonprofits. It has not been from government. It has not been from elected leaders. It has been from nonprofits who are feeding people, educating people, transporting people, trying to get the census done, trying to get the vote out. I mean, and nonprofit people tend to be overly ambitious and burn themselves out in normal times. And I'm very worried that we will have people next year saying, I just can't do this anymore, or I'm retiring early, or I got to go do something else. So I think we have to be careful and treat ourselves and our employees really well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we talked about this last week when we met for this event and talked about how you mentioned at Madison Community Foundation, you have a Zoom-free day, a meeting-free day, which I think is really helpful. I have days where I'll have multiple meetings. I'm sure you all do too. And it's just a lot. And it is draining in a different way than, if we were all in the office together. So with that, Tom, you gave me a good segue to ask all of you about, we talked a little about how the staff are working, how they're working remote, how that's all going, but how do you celebrate, motivate the staff, keep their morale up? Tom, you just shared some ideas. If David and Renee want to jump in with other ideas that you're doing, just specific to the staff, and even looking at, if they do have small children that are in school that are now home, kind of that whole big issue that's happening now.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So those are great ideas. And, I think that whole idea of social cohesion and connectivity and just remembering, that we're all hardwired for relationship is so core to the work that we do, certainly externally in the community, but also internally. One of the things that we've also done is a weekly kind of a coffee chat, and that's just for people to get together. It's just on everybody's calendars. If you can make it, show up. If you can't, you can't. And just to kind of connect and see each other. We've also been encouraging folks to, if they can, and they've got the flexibility and feel comfortable, to keep their cameras on so we can see each other and talk to each other and hear each other. Because I notice a lot of places too, you'll just have all the cameras off. And I get it. Sometimes you just need a break, but that's a way to kind of keep connected. And very early on, because people were putting in so many hours, doing all that great collaboration that Tom was talking about, and just that intensity of getting things up and running, we gave folks an extra vacation day for them to use however they needed. So we wanted to make sure that, staff know they've got flexibility. We have a lot of meetings, we've got a lot of stakeholders, and we really grind. And to make it a priority to take that time to make sure you rest. I've had the same thing, I'll be in front of my computer, 10 hours literally booked, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, it's 6 p.m. And, just to really disrupt that and tell people, put that break in your calendar, make sure you get up. A friend of mine said, get outside and walk around the house. And so walk around your neighborhood, go up and down the stairs if you're in an apartment building. So, I think just those kinds of little things, and letting staff know that you care about their well-being, that, this is really hard work. It's new work. Nobody has the answer. We're building roadmaps as we're executing, but take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And that's a really important message.
Yeah, I agree. David?
Yeah, likewise. I think we're, going back to sort of over communicating, just trying to, work with staff, talk with staff on a regular basis. We're trying to integrate more fun into our work. And I know that's very difficult to do remotely. But one thing, and I don't think any of my colleagues are on this call, so I can say that we're planning a little Halloween party where we're all going to dress up, and then the winner gets a prize, and we're gonna figure out the prize. But we also we've done something recently where we have a squirrel scale from 1 to 10, and there are different squirrel pictures, and it's how you're feeling that particular day.
That's good.
It's been good fun. But it's certainly a challenge, because I think we're all, mission driven, and, we're all, want to accomplish things, and we want to, have an impact. And so it's difficult sometimes to take a step back and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And I think that's the one message that I think, I need to think about, we all need to think about, is making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, because if we take care of ourselves, we're going to be better partners and friends and colleagues.
Yeah, I agree too. It's interesting. We forget of the times like you, Tom, driving around town, all of us driving around town, going to lunches or events and all that, or just chatting in the hallway or getting up for lunch to go run some errands. And now it's like 7 to 6, I'm just in front of my laptop and I stand up and I can barely move. And we do have to make sure you just put an appointment on your calendar and block yourself out, so you don't get an instant message or whatever it is, and you just move away. And I see this too, and I don't know if your experience is, well, that's kind of the nature of what's going on, but I see kind of bleed into what wouldn't be work times, like very early morning meetings and very late day meetings, which is fine in a sense, but I just hope that's not the new norm if we're here for quite some time, because that really stretches out the day. It becomes
Well,
weekends. I mean,
when your office is right down the hallway, and in my study, I mean, I use this room for other things. So I have a bad habit of, I'm a night owl, so it'll be like 1 in the morning, and I'm, doing some personal email, or I'm doing something online, and then I'm like, oh, I'll just check email, and then I can't help myself. Like potato chips, you can't just have one. And I start responding to people at 1 or 2 in the morning. I get very weird replies back the next day, but then it's done. So yeah, there's a lot of bleed. I will say I've done a couple things. Our president, Bob Sorge, turned me on to this idea of having a focus day, and it's been really helpful for me, actually, because between email and phone call, and the rest, it's very hard to keep all these balls in the air and get work done. So generally on Mondays, I schedule nothing. That's my day. My day is, I'm going to start the week. And the other thing I've started doing, and this started during COVID, but I think I will continue it, is I don't open email for the first 2 hours of the day. So from 8 to 10, no email. So that I can really focus on getting other work done. Because once you open email, you're in responsive mode. Right. The other thing I noticed early on is that I started calling people. I was emailing back and forth with all these colleagues, things we'd normally ask each other. And so then I started calling them, because then, then at least you get a few minutes and it's not just work related. And then one day, one of my colleagues said, yeah, what do you need? And I realized I was only calling when I actually needed something. So now I try once in a while just to, not often, but just to call somebody to say, I don't really have a work related question. How are you doing today?
Yeah.
That's, I think, part of what we've found we really enjoy at work is we enjoy each other. And if you're blessed with a workspace where you really like the people, that's a huge gap this year.
And for those of you it applies to, how are you dealing with staff that do have children at home, if they're trying to, virtual learn and all that? Like, are you finding that, I know in our office, we've done some things that's kind of structure your day around what you need. So if it ends up being kind of a long day, but it's choppy because you have to deal with the kids and all that, are you accommodating that in any way and dealing with that? Todd,
I mean, we're just trying to provide, maximum flexibility. And I think there's got to be an expectation too that, these aren't normal times, and there shouldn't be an expectation that we're going to necessarily achieve everything that we set out to achieve when we, created our budget and our work plan for the year. Fortunately, I think we've been pretty blessed in that, things have worked pretty well for us this year, but I don't think we necessarily set that expectation. I think, again, we have to take care of ourselves and celebrate the successes that we've achieved, and that's very important.
Yeah, we have a lot of staff with young children, infants, toddlers, elementary for sure. And, again, we just try to make that as flexible as possible. And if people needed, a day, we've got one person who was sending me emails at 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And I was like, oh no, like that's not okay. And she says that's actually better for me because it allows me to, sleep a little bit when the kids are sleeping, and then I can do my work and just have my brain more clear, that I prefer this right now. And I said,
Right.
okay, as long as that's a choice, and whatever flexibility you need. But yeah, it's really tough. I mean, especially if you've got kids in different schools, because then they're all on different schedules, they've got different requirements. And so as people are juggling a lot, we're trying to be as accommodating as possible.
Yeah.
We've done the same thing. We don't have that many people now. Most of our staff have older kids, but we do have somebody who now has a 2-year-old. And he actually went down to 4 hours a week for 2 or 3 months as his daycare was closed. And we just knew that's life. We have to accommodate that. I think it's some of the people, we have one person who's got a 15-year-old and 2 11-year-olds. And I check in with her once in a while. They're trying to figure it out. Her husband is working night shift now, so he can be home during the day. But that to me is the one of the biggest challenges. I've got a 15-year-old, and that's hard, and he's pretty independent. So I think there's a real sensitivity to that. There's a sensitivity to, here's what we said we would accomplish this year. Let's be reasonable. Balanced with, how do we get back to normal so we are accomplishing things?
Right.
So I think that's top of mind. I think one of the things that's been really positive is from our leadership is the sensitivity to these issues and a sensitivity to safety. We have a couple of staff who are more immunocompromised. So even when we were saying, let's do 1 day a week, if you don't want to come in, you can just work from home. So we're trying to really be sensitive to what people are going through. And I think in the end, it's going to be the mental health toll that especially next year. I mean, as most of you probably did, kind of girded your loins for 3 months thinking, okay, we can close from March to June. We'll make that work. And then July and August, and now it's, God knows, another year of this, who knows? So I think that the exhaustion of doing this all, while everybody reinvents it. I mean, look at what the school system has had to bend out backwards. And it's challenging when the kids are in school, let alone when they're not.
Right.
You're caretaking for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys have all experienced this too, where, we are coming into just like, you can get a normal cold, but there's such anxiety around just having what ends up being a cold. I have coworkers that have gone and got tested just because you just want to make sure. And, things are going to happen like that. And I think that's a whole other layer of stress and anxiety that we'll all have, including everybody we work with, to deal with as we go into the colder months. And so that should be another interesting aspect of the whole thing.
And I think, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the professional work environment, for folks who are working third shift, who are working in service jobs, you just compound that with exposure, with health illness, with, less income, less flexibility. So I just want to make sure we work that into.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So I'm going to switch gears, but and talk just about fundraising within your organizations, and then for those of you that are supporting outside individuals such as United Way and the Community Foundation, how that's all working. So I know I'll start with Tom, because I know you mentioned that on the MCF side that piece is going well, but then on your nonprofit organizations you're working with, maybe not so well. So if you want to talk about that.
So I think of this in terms of the macro level, that what COVID has done is magnified every fault line we had in our society, right? Everything that was kind of wrong or slightly wrong in society right now is blaring. And I think that's true for nonprofits. So if you were living very close to the edge budget-wise as a nonprofit before COVID, you're paying the price for that now. If you had relationships with only 1 or 2 funders rather than a robust, diverse funding stream, you're in trouble. So, those agencies that had a reserve fund and an endowment and relationships with major donors, individual donors, they seem to be weathering the storm pretty well. But if you don't have some of those pieces, those are the people who are struggling the most. I think one of the best I would say there are two things that I've seen nonprofits doing this year that work the best. And one of them is being creative, being able to pivot. It's all mission driven. If you can be creative and just follow your mission, it can't be, I throw my hands up, I'm closing my doors, this is too hard. So, you see people, I just saw that the Wisconsin Youth Symphony Orchestra, they're doing a series of master classes. They're virtual, and they're using guest artists from San Francisco, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Stockholm.
Wow.
Canopy Dance is doing the same thing. They're teaching 20 classes right now, individual and group classes online, and they're bringing in guest artists from Chicago and New York because they can. In a virtual environment, geography doesn't mean anything. So I appreciate that creativity. The second thing I've seen is nonprofits being as honest as possible about how their priorities have shifted. And relating that all to what their impact can be. So I think that's the important message as you're talking to donors is we are continuing to do literacy training. We are continuing to teach art. We're continuing to tutor kids, but this is how we're doing it. So we need 50,000 worth of laptops to get out, or we need outdoor awnings and heating for our food pantries so that we can do drive-through service this winter. You want to feel good, just call Oscar Morales at Omega School. Got the positivity in my calls with him. And when the MATC had to shut down their GED testing here in town, he found out that there was a GED testing site open, I think in Green Bay, and he started giving out gas cards to the young people they're working with saying, drive to Green Bay and take the test, and they have been. So he's had graduates from the GED program even while everything's been shut down. And I've had organizations that the first thing we did when COVID struck is we called every grantee we had and we said, where are you? What are your priorities? And if you need to shift the grant money that we've already awarded you to more pertinent priorities, let us know. And we made all those changes. The American Girl Fund for Children did the same thing. They said, just do good work, stay alive. If you can't perform, that they fund a lot of arts performances. Don't worry about it. Keep the money, use it well, use it for your top priority. And I've heard that from other funders as well. So I think being able to be really honest about where you are. And then, some of these organizations, Literacy Network, great example, right? What do? They teach literacy, but what they found was that over 70% of their people they were tutoring lost their jobs. So all of a sudden they're doing job referrals, they're giving gas cards, they're giving grocery cards. They are becoming more important to their clients than they were pre-COVID. And I think that the volunteers they're working with are having a richer connection with the agency and the clients than they were beforehand. So I'm always looking for silver linings for this. I think their message has been, we became more important in this world rather than less. And I think that ability to say priorities might have shifted, the impact that we are seeking out absolutely does not. I think that's really that kind of honesty related to how we will, we're blindfolded and have one hand tied behind our back, but we will do it by gum. That's one of the most powerful things I love about nonprofits. And I think that funders really, really relate to that. Funders are on the ride with you. I often talk to nonprofits about that. There isn't a trick to trick someone out of their money and then you go do what you want to do. We're on the train. If one of our agencies stumbles, we feel the pain with them, and when they succeed, we feel the euphoria with them. And ideally, that's the kind of relationship you want, right? I see Renee nodding her head, right? We just funded something yesterday, and one of our board members said, "This grant is what makes me proud to be part of the community foundation," right? He feels that connection with the organizations that are going to do this work with thousands of people. That we are on the train, and I think that's and never has there been a case where we're all in this together. I don't care how poor or wealthy you are right now. This is a horrible year. This is a horrible year. I've talked with donors who are as unhappy as I am, stuck at home, not engaging in the way they want to. So I think there's an immediate kinship and understanding with donors. And I think connect as much as possible, have honest conversations. You don't have to ask for money. You can just, I had somebody call me recently and all he did was chat and said, I'm working with 5 other agencies. We're all in the same boat. Just wanted to let you be aware. It was fantastic, great conversation. But then I talked to 3 other funders and say, do you know this is going on? And I can share that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. David, what about you?
Yeah, what Tom said.
Yeah. Oh, sure, sure.
No, it's so true. So true. I mean, Tom, you just, you really nailed it. I mean, you know, I guess for us, you know, we have been trying to really reach out to not only the folks that support us, but the folks that we support. We're kind of a unique animal in that we do provide small grants out, but also we have to fundraise for our operations. So it's this dynamic here that, you know, we do a lot of pass-through funding for DNR programs, state natural area management, that sort of thing. I guess one of the things that we've done with our model that's been a little bit different or unique, and I sort of spoke to this a little bit earlier, but some of these pass-through grants that we generally write for our partners, say the DNR in this case, we have had to pivot a little bit on that and say, you know what, if we're not covering our own staff, we're going to have to let staff go. And so instead of necessarily writing that pass-through grant, we'll write that for our own program to support our own staff to make sure that we keep our own staff on. But I would say that, you know, our donor base has just been really, really supportive, and you know, they've been with us on the train right along. And I think you know, we try to keep the focus on the mission as best we can. And really, we're not building our coffers by any stretch, but we're trying to maintain our current staff while at the same time supporting those programs that really do have impact.
Right. No, that's great. And what Tom said, right?
And what Tom said.
All right, Renee.
Yeah.
Oh, and before you start, Renee, I was just going to say, you know, the online campaign, we're part of the United Way campaign at SVA, and I thought it was pretty slick, actually. It's
Oh,
the
thank
easiest.
you.
It's super easy. So that was a great idea, the way that's working.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. And thank you for your generosity. We really appreciate a great partnership. Kirsten's also a great Women United volunteer too. No, thank you. You know, I was at a meeting with Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings this morning where we're talking about schools of hope and how that looks in this new world. And obviously that's around getting our Black and brown kids reading and, you know, looking at those opportunity debts that we're trying to help solve. And she brought up a quote from Arundhati Roy, who said, this pandemic is a portal, you know, really implying from old to new. And I think those fissures that Tom was talking about, we've seen so much of that, not only in the nonprofit infrastructure and service delivery, but also in our other systems, right? We know in healthcare, in housing, in education. And so this really is a moment to innovate. And that's been the thing that I have seen that is just so inspiring. We've done a number of agency surveys. And one of the things our nonprofits are telling us is that, you know, think about telehealth visits or case management visits that used to be in home or at the agency, and they're being so nimble in terms of how to reach families and how to provide service. All of the meal delivery programs, most of those volunteers were older adults who are at highest risk for COVID. And so to go to the Business Volunteer Network and very quickly get, you know, a lot of EPIC employees actually in to fill up those shifts. We had all the Meals on Wheels shifts filled within three days. So there's, you know, that kind of innovation and outreach and a lot of newness that's going on. And in the last survey we did, many of them said the majority of the new evolutions they've made, they'll keep post-pandemic. So I think that's a really cool opportunity. You know, the other thing around the original question of fundraising, most of the agencies have said because they were able to get the PPP loan, and again, kudos to Madison Community Foundation for getting Melissa Schultz and friends all together to help agencies with that capacity. We've also started doing a regular newsletter out to agency partners with funding resources and, you know, what's going on with stimulus and policy. But they're feeling, relatively stable for 2020, but terrified about 2021. And so I think in terms of, what David's talking about, commitment to retain staff, but also we know, service need is going to be exponential. I'm so concerned around winter in our homelessness population. You've got a lot of folks, at the normal sort of August landlord-tenant renewal time. A lot of leases didn't get renewed. So, a lot of families right now, the county's done a really good job in terms of the hoteling situation. Obviously, they just announced with the city this week, the shelter for adult men. And so there's a lot of that work going on right now. But we still know that getting folks stably housed and supported to get to self-sufficiency and independence is really, the goal, which just is a slower burn right now because of the emergency and the crisis nature of this pandemic. So, a lot of the pivot that we've done has been exactly what you just mentioned. And I'm so glad it's easy, trying to figure out how do you bring the campaign to individuals, right? And to really help people who already have a broader awareness, as Tom said, of the pandemic. And whereas before people might have said, oh, poverty, that's these people and that's not my community. This external force created need that's going on right now, and everybody at least is knowledgeable about it, if not compassionate about that. And so to be able to pull together and really figure out that, the strength that holds us together is community. So how we live and work in community right now is what is going to help us get through. We need innovation to use those precious resources as effectively as possible. We need to collaborate with partners to make sure that we can amplify our energy together, and then that innovation to figure out how do we build that economy that works for more people? How do we take this moment of going from that portal from then to the future to make sure that we got those on-ramps to figure out for those folks at the Literacy Network who've lost their jobs, there are jobs and wages that allow families to raise their families, to be stably housed, to have what they need, and that basic needs lowest part of that Maslow's triangle to get to self-efficacy, right? Because we are, education and literacy and all those job skills, that comes after basic needs, being stable, feeling safe, having that, solid health baseline. And so we will continue to work on that larger systemic change that needs to happen. And for now, how we pull together, raise those resources, keep these agencies and small businesses alive so that we can come back to them, have something to come back to, and then also evolve that forward, because we know there's a lot of opportunity for that new design for a more equitable community.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you seen the number of donors increase this year?
So far it's, we're only halfway through. So our campaign's at around 6.5 million or so right now. The most poignant story was DMB Community Bank. I'll shout you out. Last year they had about half their team participate. This year they had almost 100% participation, and their campaign tripled. So, you think about that in terms of individuals and participation and growth. Now that good news always comes early and the bad news comes a little later. So, but I think that's indicative that people are seeing the need. They are feeling personally asked. And as Kirsten said, we are trying to make it really easy for folks to participate. So I'll be able to answer that question more completely in about 3 months.
Yeah,
but I sure hope so. I hope so. And if you're on, please invite everyone to help make sure that we've got those resources for 2021 budget.
I was going to mention too. Oh, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Tom, we're running a little bit ahead, and I don't know how others are, but I think people have just been very generous.
I agree.
Yeah, including Diane Ballwig, who's on here. I see you in the chat. Not only is she doing her regular commitment, which is already very generous, and made an additional for the COVID-19 response, right? So people are just, they've got the heart, the generosity, and thank you, Diane, for your leadership and for inspiring so many others to give too.
I hope that is the long tail. That would be the best thing to come out of this, is that there's still a small percentage of people, especially people of true wealth, who are giving at all. I met with a donor this year who's starting with a $500,000 gift. And we were talking about, what are some of the things going on in society? And he really had no idea. And I kept trying to tease out of him, well, what are you interested in? What have you supported in the past? He said, I've never supported anything. And I said, well, when have you felt good when you gave something? He said, I've never, he was in his 60s. He's got millions of dollars. but hasn't had that connection, which
Mhm.
fascinated me because I grew up in that world, and I think
Right.
sometimes we're in a little bit of a nonprofit echo chamber that we assume, oh, everybody is going to give a hand up to their neighbor. So I think we have an opportunity to try to engage more people and have them feel like they're part of this. We need to really inspire
Mhm.
philanthropy.
Right, I agree. There are chats going on in the chat room if you want to check that out. And also, if you have a question, and Diana's making a lot of comments, which is great. I did want to mention too, just Renee briefly brought up the PPP program or PPP loan program, and we have had a lot of our nonprofit clients participate in that, which has been great. We also, just so everyone knows, if you're interested, need more information, we are having an event next Wednesday, a webinar on the program and the loan forgiveness. So things are moving finally now to getting to that forgiveness point of this whole process. So you can register or check it out at svaaccountants.com/events, or just go to sva.com, go to the event page, and you will find it. Or you can email me at any time if you need to find this. But it's just great information, another short form webinar, but we have a task force that has been working on this since the beginning. So they're very knowledgeable. I did want to mention that as well. So we are down about 10 minutes, and I knew this conversation would just fly by because you guys are engaged and have got a lot of great information. But I thought, and Renee, I think, well, three of you have brought up 2021. And so I'll just kind of go around the circle and say, what do you see happening within your agency, if you're supporting other people, and then, what are your concerns? What are your opportunities? So I'll start with David.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. We're struggling with that because we're as fearful as anyone, I think, about 2021. We're going through the budgeting process right now. We're budgeting flat. The one thing that we are doing is we did get a PPP loan. We've talked with several accountants, and we're looking at pushing actually that the relief into 2021. And so that we hope will help with our 2021 budget, because we are running, donors have been very supportive, and fortunately we've received more in giving this year, even over and above the PPP. So we're trying to push those dollars in 2021, hopefully to give us a little relief in 2021, because that's what's really concerning. Otherwise, I guess we just, I think we're just coming out of strategic planning. So we'll be, working closely with our partners and donors and supporters, and really just maintain that focus on our mission. I guess the other thing that I was talking with a colleague recently, and we're on our fiscal budget runs from January to December. And given these circumstances, the COVID circumstances, I really wish we had a July to June budget. But for those of you who do, I think it's going to be a little bit easier, maybe, to budget. So that could be helpful for those organizations that are on that budget cycle.
Yeah. Tom or Renee?
I'll mention sort of three things. So starting with staff, I would say acknowledge staff struggles and reward them. Many of you who've done capital campaigns in the past, you've heard me say to the executive director at the end of the capital campaign, did you buy a plane ticket for your director of development? Did you treat them somehow? Send them to Hawaii. You just raised $4 million, spend $500 on a plane ticket, or because they're going to burn out, and never more so than this year. One of the things that we do at the Community Foundation is we give out gift certificates for State Street. A lot of locally owned businesses. The bid right now is selling a lot of different gift certificates. I really encourage you to buy local. And that's a great way, $25 gift certificate for your staff, so they go spend some money somewhere in town, because we're going to lose a lot of our locally owned businesses. I'm anticipating that there will be mergers. 3,000 nonprofits, that's been untenable for a long time. I can't imagine that they will all come out. I don't think we'll see a lot just kind of disappear, but that work can be continued through efficiencies and collaboration. So that's what I'm preparing, is we may be funding more mergers. And then finally, I would just encourage people to really prioritize what your plan is, what your strategic plan is for 2021. This may be blasphemy, but maybe you don't need to do a fancy annual report. Maybe you don't have to have that chicken dinner or that legacy dinner. You know, I mean, where are your resources best spent? And you know, maybe you take a year off from this or for that, and just really focus on, here's the impact. I think we do a lot of things because we've done them and then we expect we'll do them every year. Oh, our lunch is coming up, our gala is coming up, our run is coming up. Maybe not. Maybe, you know, simplify, right? Marie Kondo, hold up everything you spend your money on and say, is this precious to me? And if it isn't, move on.
Does it bring you joy?
Does it bring you joy? That's what
Especially
it is.
those events that may bring no one in the organization any joy.
Steve Goldberg. Steve Goldberg is the happiest man because of all the chicken dinners.
No more chicken for Steve.
Well,
And
what brings you joy and what also is legally compliant. So make sure you still file your annual report.
Your $9.90, but maybe you don't need a 40-page report with photographs and
yeah,
all that.
right on. So yeah, I think that 2021, I mean, the continued focus is going to be really important. I think collaboration and mergers are also on the horizon. You know, we have tried across nonprofits to be vertically integrated, and you know, collaboration is where it's at, because to have multiple folks, you know, raising these resources, doing these programs, you know, we're working with families, whole families, and right now families are engaging with multiple services and multiple organizations. So if we can center families and collaborate together to make sure they get what they need, so our community gets what it needs, that is a win-win and a big opportunity to innovate right now. I think that technology infrastructure to help it to continue to be more efficient, to continue to look at those resources and how we gather them and how they're deployed and how we're accountable for what happens with them. Now's the moment in time where there are going to be a lot of folks investing in that kind of ability to do reporting in a more real-time way. And I think there are a lot of national foundations who are investing in that. So it's a time for us to get even smarter about how we invest resources to affect social change. And I'm also loving the leadership from a lot of our Black, Latinx, Asian, and Native-led nonprofits. They are really coming into their own in terms of the leadership, as you know, a lot of the community is trying to figure out what's going on in this race conversation, and you know, what does it mean to be looking at disparity and understanding historical root causes, and to be able to, you know, really help knit together the community in a way that I think we've missed the community health worker level. We've got really established nonprofits. We've got families who are very grassroots at the neighborhood level, and sort of the translation between culturally competent, family-centric individuals who are already, you know, they know families because of church, they know family because of the neighborhood, they know family because of schools. So for us to get from here to there and reduce those racial achievement gaps, to get more people graduated so they can go into the community ready to work and learn, to make sure that we have enough housing for everybody who wants to work in Dane County. Those are the kinds of things that I think this will really spearhead some of those innovative conversations to build an economy that works for more people and to be that Dane County that we all know, love, and expect to be for every single resident. So it's going to be tough. I think we're going to see more of the ongoing disproportionate impact on our Black, brown, and poor community members. And so we've got to all embrace that and figure out how we can build that better together. And I know that we will.
All right, very well said by all. So I knew this would happen. I feel like we're just getting warmed up and we could go into hour 2, but we're not, unfortunately. But I want to thank all of you for doing this. I know everybody's super busy, and I really appreciate the 3 of you joining us today. And also, again, thank you to QTI. It has been awesome, a great conversation. Who knows, maybe we'll have to have a regroup 6 months from now and say, now what's happening? But with that, mentioning our next webinar, December 15th on a Tuesday. Fill out your surveys, give us ideas, speaker ideas, content ideas. We would love your feedback. And then also, hopefully, there were lots of good ideas here for you, or just even if this made you feel better and connect with people, that's always a positive as well. So again, thank you, everybody. When you do get our invite for the next event, feel free to forward to your friends, your colleagues, anybody in the nonprofit sector, as we would love you to attend. And we are just at our ending time. So thanks again, everybody. I so appreciate you participating today, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.